to kind of start us off, I just wanted to kind of ask. So John and I have obviously we've done this is like our third episode talking about the book, and so John's given a lot of his thoughts on this. But could you just kind of touch on maybe a little bit about like the way you overall structure the book, kind of how you or like what your kind of goal is for the book, and like why you went about it the way you do?
Sure. Well, I learned from my mistakes really, which is that Deliverance of God was, I think, epistemologically and methodologically very pure, and it was a rhetorical catastrophe. I didn't know that till I wrote it. So what I learned was people don't like a frontal assault on all the things that they care about, surprisingly. And I thought the scholarly arena would be able to cope with the conversation. Turned out it couldn't. So I learned by teaching at Duke, really, that the best way to open people's minds up to what was going on theologically in Paul was to introduce them to the good stuff up front and say, look, this is Paul's gospel. Isn't it great? And then talk about how prevailing readings and interpretations actually messed that up and captured it. So everything's kind of flipped around. So we start with the good stuff. And we are interested in theology. And we are interested in making that accessible. So why do we start with God's truth? If you want to talk about theology, I think Bart was right. There's no getting around this. There's only really one way to do it that's going to work and be authentic if what you're saying is Jesus is Lord. And if you're confessing Jesus is Lord, which is what we all confess as Christians, if you're not confessing that, go away and rethink what you're doing, because this is the heart of what we're about. If you're confessing Jesus is Lord, you're confessing that he's the truth. And then you have to go, oh, shoot, I could only know this is the truth if the Lord who is the truth has revealed it to me. And what tends to happen is something really good, which is you put Christ in charge of all your truth claims about God.
Yeah.
All your God talk, controlled by Jesus and controlled by the crucified Christ, the Christ of Easter. Very, very important things flow from that. And then in the light of that, you can see where folks have lost their way. And the book is really trying to say, hey, a lot of people reading Paul have very sincerely, with the best of intentions, lost their way. And they've kind of occluded and covered up the real gospel. So let's start in the right place. Let's quickly talk about what the gospel is, and then let's see how we've gotten lost and try and get back onto the straight and narrow path.
Now, so you mentioned occlusion of kind of Christ's centrality and the centrality of revelation of and by Christ. Where do you think the most common occlusions of Christ kind of come from? Where do these tend to pop up in people's thinking about God?
Yeah, there's a couple of things going on here. Well, there's a textual origin.
Yeah.
But there's also, I think, deeper than that. There's a set of cultural and political commitments that we feel very, very strongly about. We're very emotionally invested in them.
Sure.
I mean, it's July the 5th, and they were on full display yesterday.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Basically. And there's a good way of celebrating America.
Yeah.
And there's a bad way of doing that. And when America becomes more important than God, what you're going to do is identify them.
Yeah.
And that's when the trouble starts. And you'll find texts in Paul, just a few, that can be read in that way, I think incorrectly. And then at that point, you're in big trouble, because America is a nation state. And Jesus was crucified by a nation state, by an empire. If he'd wanted to construct the church like a nation state, he would have come as an emperor, but he didn't. He came as a homeless, unemployed, wandering prophet. And the state was afraid of him and executed him. So something's going on there that we need to hear.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, this has been Apocalypse Here.
Christianity you can live with.